All right, we are live. I am Michelle Farrell, co-founder and co-coach of Straight Up Strong with my partner here, Tina Tang, and we have our very special guest, Dr. Diana Singleton, with us today. She is a pelvic floor physical therapist. In some countries, would be known as a physiotherapist, I believe, who specializes in supporting women with having a healthy pelvic floor. And I'm really excited to have you with us today to kind of give us a little overview of who you are and why you do what you do, and what the what. It almost sounded like I was going to say, what the hell is the pelvic floor? So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Diana, what you do and why you do it?
Great. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me too. I'm so excited to be talking about this with you and the Straight Up Strong community. So I'm Diana Singleton, and I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist, and I work with tissue and muscles in the pelvic region of the body. I studied physical therapy many years ago. I've been a physical therapist for over 10 years, and I specialized in orthopedics and sports medicine for a long time. And then when I got pregnant with my son, almost 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to switch my focus to more pelvic floor and learn about that. And after I had him, I just continued more and more of my training with the pelvic floor. And I've just grown so passionate about treating women with pelvic floor issues and learning more and more about this part of the body. My athletic background is more with track. I ran track for 8 years. I ran in college. I was an 800-meter runner, and I did powerlifting when I was in high school. And after I had my son, I got back into running again and, pushing him, doing races with the stroller. And now I'm getting back into the lifting again. So sports has always been such a big part of my life. I come from a very athletic family, and always knew that I wanted to work in a field that I would get to talk about exercise. So it's been a really nice mix of my orthopedic background with learning more and more about pelvic floor, and especially working with active women. That's my favorite population, I would say, to work with, and just combining the two, because really knowing about the pelvic floor and how it impacts the whole rest of our body was just really fascinating, and it's really nice to see people get better. So I know a common question is, what is the pelvic floor? We hear about that term all the time, and a lot of people don't know exactly what it is. So I brought my pelvic model just because a visual always seems to help. And what the pelvic floor is, let's say, the pelvic floor is 3 layers of muscles that are right along the bottom of the pelvis. So they sling right along the bottom there. And these muscles perform our most important daily functions, such as being able to have a urine stream. I don't know if you can see it okay. Being able to have a urine stream, a bowel movement. There's lymphatic and blood flow that pumps through this area of the body all the time so that it doesn't get congested in this area, and helps prevent bacteria and infections and all of that. The contractions that happen in the pelvic floor are what allow for orgasms during sex. They're what allow for women to deliver babies vaginally. And further, there is the deeper layer in the pelvic floor called the levator ani, and that's what holds up the pelvic organs. So you've got the bladder, the uterus, and the intestines that all sit in the bowl of the pelvis. And then finally, the pelvic floor, all of the muscles together really act as what we call our primary core stability. So we think of our abs a lot of the time as our core, but it really starts with these muscles here. When you go to get up out of a chair, when you go to take a step or even reach for something, they're the first muscles in the body to contract. So if they don't know how to properly tighten and relax and function well, then we lose a little bit of support and stability through the pelvic area. So I tend to see a lot of pregnant and postpartum women due to the excess strain on this area during that time of life. But I also work with, a handful of college women in that age. And I also see women who are going through menopause and postmenopausal. There's many points in a woman's life where pelvic floor issues are going to come up. One of the more common things that I see women for is urinary incontinence, or your bladder leaks, basically. That's a really common thing. I would also say painful sex has got to be like another really common thing that I see women for. And constipation, believe it or not. Pelvic organ prolapse, they come in for too. That's when the pelvic organs, so the bladder, uterus, and intestines that sit right in the pelvis there, sometimes they can relax into the vaginal opening. And a lot of women, they find out that they have a prolapse, or they just experience pressure there one day, don't know what it is, and they don't always know that there's something that can be done for it, and it can be very well managed. So we see women a lot for that. And things such as chronic hip and back pain, believe it or not, pelvic floor physical therapy helps a lot with. And what a lot of people don't realize is there's such a pressure balance within the pelvic floor that impacts the back. So a lot of the times back pain can stem from not having the right activation or relaxation in your pelvic floor. But it's a really important area of the body. And I'm so passionate about talking about it because I feel like oftentimes women will suffer in silence with these issues, and they're so embarrassed to talk to anyone about it. They don't know that their friends or their family are probably also going through similar. But I've also had women, when they tell their doctors about a leaking issue or painful sex or things, they sometimes get brushed off, or they get looked at like, well, you shouldn't have that issue. I don't know what's wrong. And then it's like even more degrading experience when you're, putting out there something very private and personal and embarrassing, and then finding that you don't think there's anything that's going to help it. And I love the field of pelvic floor PT. It's such an empowering place for women and men to come and find out about how that they can do some things to help resolve these issues. And a lot of the times it revolves around things as basic as getting the right fluid intake, eating the right amount of fiber. How do you sit on the toilet properly without bearing down? Some basic things that can be addressed immediately. So it's nice to see within even a few sessions, people can get better.
So I thought of a question that I think some people listening would probably wonder. So the pelvic floor, what you're describing in terms of how it's internal, you would think, wouldn't the body just why would you have to train or your body to do something? Wouldn't it be natural that the body or the brain and whatever muscles would just know what to do?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question because, right, these muscles are so interesting in this region because they act voluntarily and involuntarily, meaning that they have the ability to contract, when you're not even thinking about it. Because they're the muscles that basically are holding in the poo and the pee and everything like that. So those muscles are doing a function. And then there's parts of the pelvic floor that require more, okay, I need to tighten up there, contract, and you need to tell it to relax. So this region of the body is smart and has the ability to do all of that. The thing with the pelvic floor is it's one of the most highly emotional parts of the body, and it holds on to memories. And when there's been any trauma or discomfort ever, even as something as, your first period, and you find that it's painful to put a tampon in, your pelvic floor now is going to hold on to that memory and stay tense. It's going to be guarded. It's going to, tighten up at any sign of stress. So that signal becomes very hardwired neurologically. So there's a strong mind-body connection with the pelvic floor. And once the pelvic floor has sensed certain things or certain, input that it doesn't like, then it's going to hold on to that, and it has to relearn how to, function properly again. Sometimes, a lot of cases, that's how do you get a very tight pelvic floor to relax down and know that things are safe and it's okay. And with the bladder issues that we see, that's very neurological too. There's a whole chain of events that happen, which I'll talk more about in the workshop, but the brain is fascinating in its role with bladder and urinary incontinence issues. And there's a whole set of training that you do to retrain the system in the bladder, because if you think about it, we learn a lot of habits as a kid, and if we're told hover over the toilet seat or make sure you go pee before you leave the house, like every time, even if you don't have to go, those messages are really ingrained in us, and we can start to build not so great habits as a result of that. I find that women that have had babies too, they're up multiple times at night. So once you get used to, every time I'm awake, I have to go to the bathroom, now that can start to teach the body to go more frequently than it needs to. So it kind of depends on life experiences and all of that.
It's very interesting. I just remembered I had when you were talking about how it holds on to memories. I had a longtime coaching client who had admitted it was painful for her to have sex, even though she was happily married. She was on her second child, and I don't remember she started going to a pelvic floor therapist, and over time that changed, and it was related to, like you said, is like the whole pelvic floor was like holding on tight, and I think that's why it was painful. But with her also, as you said, is very emotional, because she mentioned, so I almost feel like you're a therapist mentally too, right, for clients, because it's really, her mom is very abusive. So I don't know how, but like there is some kind of connection, for her as to why sex was very painful. And then, over time with the pelvic floor therapist, I think she started learning how to relax a little bit so that wouldn't be painful.
Right. Yeah, it gets better. It's almost hard for people sometimes to think when they've had, whether it's a pelvic pain issue or chronic constipation issues or whatever it is, it's hard sometimes for people to visualize themselves on the other side of it and better, just because it's gone on so long. And when it's internal and you can't see it and it doesn't make sense, and no one can really tell you how to get better, it feels like it never will. But
and nobody talks about it.
That's the big thing.
Especially with sex. I feel like for women with sex, it's kind of, a lot of times it's acceptable for it to not be pleasurable, to be neutral, but also sometimes it's not going to be comfortable, but it's just, you're still just going to do it. And I think the more we can talk about it and bring awareness to it, that it's, it can be better. It can be corrected. It can be, and this is not the way it has to be. Super, super important and empowering in itself. So the work you do is just so important on so many levels. Physically, mentally, and culturally and societally. It's really great.
Thank you. That was honestly what made me so passionate about it. It was the realization that women put up with this stuff and just stuff it down and don't talk about it and don't do anything about it, and almost embarrassed to even talk about their sexuality, even with their partner. And it's just it's not acceptable, really. It's not how things should be. And I feel like we learn things, we teach our children how to act and behave, and they pick up on little things too. So I find it empowers kids too, of moms that are going to pelvic floor PT, mom's not gonna just let her body fall apart or so.
I think with the besides the cycle you were mentioning, incontinence is super common, and I think a lot of women just assume it's just that it just happens.
People laugh it off all the time.
Yeah, they're just like, oh yeah, I was peeing. No, I did pee in my pants, but I think people don't realize that you can. It doesn't have to be that way. Also.
Yeah.
Right. And the sooner you can get on top of why it's happening, sometimes the easier it is. Although I've had people with pretty significant bladder leakage and have a full resolution of that issue. But it's almost like, yeah, that little leak, I think people brush off if there's a leak and they have a sneeze or a cough, because, I mean, they probably hear that that's so common, but that to me is the tip of the iceberg. It's like, okay, what's your pelvic floor not doing properly? Is it too tight? Is it, not coordinated? Do you hold your breath? What is it that's causing that? Because if you can, correct even a small little habit, it can make a really big difference.
Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry. I know you didn't show it on the pelvis, but I think I remember reading, and you can kind of cover, because I think people now assume that it's like mostly a female thing, but from what I understood, erectile dysfunction is also related to pelvic floor issues, or is that like sometimes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, for a second.
Yeah, could you go over that too, so that people don't think it's just a female, like the pelvic floor only matters for females in terms of, sex, giving birth, or like peeing and stuff like that?
Yes. So men have pelvic floors too. And that's something that people don't always realize. And men have very serious issues too, like painful ejaculation or erectile dysfunction and things like that. And I mean, my work is very specialized with women, but I have gone through training to treat men too. Not that I see that population, but I've talked to men about pelvic floors, and it's really important. And they actually get tension through this region of the body too. And many of the pelvic floor muscles that women have, like men have the same ones as well. And if there's tension, it's hard to kind of show exactly on all the muscles, but you can see they're very individual and they're small, and it's almost like a woven basket together of all these little muscles. And if you start to get tension in one of them, then it can start to create pressure on a nerve, on an artery, blood supply, and that can significantly impact their ability, to have sex, and even have bowel movements or have a steady urine stream. Men have leaking issues as well. And there's really effective pelvic floor treatment for that too. They can have the releases done too. They get the same kind of bladder training, and some of it crosses together. Some of the training that I give the women could absolutely apply to the men. But I know plenty of good pelvic floor physical therapists that specialize with men too. And it's the sad thing with the men is that they don't always seek the care. They feel like they seek the care even less frequently than the women.
That's actually very true, right? Women are a lot more sensitive about when something's wrong, because we have different things that happen throughout our lives that we're always like, we'll go to the gynecologist annually, but what does a man go to, a urologist? I'm sure that most men don't go outside of their GP.
Yeah, right. I think I almost wish that it was part of just a regular physical exam with your primary care doctor to go over basic understanding of how frequently you should be peeing every day, how you should be going poop and not straining. Like, that's how hemorrhoids happen. That's how,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's just there's a lot of preventative, simple things that could be discussed in terms of just adequate fiber, adequate fluid intake, and all of that. Very basic things that can make a huge difference.
Fascinating.
It's going to be a really great workshop on this.
Oh, it's going to be so good. I have like so many questions, and I have so many comments, and I'm like so excited for January 23rd, when we can really dive into some of these things in a little bit more depth. And even, one of the things I was going to say is that I was actually watching a commercial for a particular pad, for an incontinence pad, and it was all about this strong woman getting ready to go to work or whatever, and then she, like, her daughter goes to like do something, and she has, I'm going to say the name of the product here because I can't without saying this tagline. She has poise on the outside and poise in her pants. And I'm just like,
oh,
or she could go see a pelvic floor physical therapist and not have to have poise in her pants. I was like,
you know, and yet they still make so much money because people are oftentimes looking for a quick and easy solution.
And I mean, in the meantime, like, great, like, perfect, but it's definitely seen by most people that that's the solution. Like,
Right.
you have any sort of leakage difficulties or challenges, and that's what you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. And so
urinary leakage, that's the, you know, one of the interesting things about that too, because it's so common and we're used to just putting a Band-Aid on it, or should I say a pad or a panty liner to treat the issue. That it's such a tip of the iceberg issue, and it's one of the leading reasons why women later in life get admitted into the nursing home. So I always kind of bring that up because it doesn't really matter. I've treated women with it in their 80s even and seen progress there. But I mean, if you're a young woman and that's an issue and it's just going to keep progressing, or, you know, you're at the start of menopause and noticing it, that's a good time to get on top of it and not just cover it up, you know, use a pad or something. There's real reason to address it.
I thought of one last question. I don't know if Michelle's going. It's not just about Kegels, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, Kegels I feel like even when I visited with doctors, I think they think that we only teach people how to properly do Kegels, and at least half of my caseload, I'm telling them, you're not even appropriate to do Kegels. You might never have to do Kegels, like focus on these other things. So there's a place for them. They're great for some people, but they're not for everyone. And it usually takes seeing a pelvic floor PT sometimes to know.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Well, I can't wait until Saturday, January 23rd. Full workshop, 90 minutes to, you know, however long it is. Dr. Singleton is going to share with us some more examples of what she treats and how she treats, and answer questions from members and from the public who join the workshop. So if you are interested, I hope that you are. I think this is a super important topic and conversation for everybody to start to learn about and get interested in and ask questions about. So we will drop the link in the comments. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Tina and I at coach@straightupstrong.com. And also, Diana, how can people find you?
They can go to my website, reclaimyourstrengthpt.com, or email me at diana@reclaimyourstrengthpt. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and yeah.
All the
everywhere.
Yeah.
We'll link all your information in the description when we post the videos too, so that everybody can find you and join us on the 23rd. So
great. I can't wait. This is going to be great.
Thank you so much for being here with us, and everybody who tuned in, or if you're watching the replay, let us know if you were here live or if you caught the replay, and we will see you on the 23rd.